you very much. And given the enormous interest that people have in your work, we've partnered with ICRIER. Rajat Kathuria is here, who heads ICRIER, and they've helped us put together a panel on PDP bill and its implications, just to get a lot of intellectual input and domain expertise into the debate. So from here on, I'll ask Rajat to introduce the panel and the backdrop, and put forward the concerns and ideas that your panelists may have to Mrs. Lekhi. Rajat? Yeah. Can we pin Rajat?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Samir, introduction and SKOCH for inviting ICRIER to participate, collaborate in the crucial discussion on the data bill. Ashiji was saying, I think going to be a policy as we've been doing work and it's going to be is how does privacy and respect for individual integrity of the data, how does that trade off with the economics of growth digital economy? Now the question is there a trade-off? Is the implication on privacy and integrity going to have any implication for the economic might of the nation, or is it going to affect GDP? Even if you have to promise a little bit the economic value, it's important to put privacy at the forefront. And privacy, there may be a little trade-off. This is for you cannot let the fund, you cannot even shift if you want to. And you've been part of many, and our team has been a part of many which very extreme position. And those extreme positions sometimes you will see
I think we've lost Rajat. He seemed to be having bandwidth problems and electricity problems as well. So is Rajat back? Otherwise, maybe move on to the panelists.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Rajat. Maybe you can switch off your video and just use the audio. That will solve the bandwidth problem somewhat. You're mute. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Is that? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, wonderful. So I was saying on the one hand is that there are people who argue that privacy is fundamental and cannot. On the other hand, of course, there are people who say that there should be complete free flow of data, and India should not compromise. India should not impose any restrictions on data and data localization, and the processing of that data could be done anywhere, regardless of where we are. So those are two extreme positions, and I think as we know that data gives value. Data is the new oil, to use a cliche. Of course, a lot of people say that data is a toxic, but I just want to pause a moment here and look at a very big picture, very broad picture, and look at the geopolitics of data and innovation, artificial intelligence that Meenakshi ji was talking about. And if you try and analyze what is happening between the United States and China today and the genesis of the trade war, I think at the center of that was the desire or the ambition to dominate the world in a technological manner and dominate artificial intelligence. And therefore, President Trump imposed, I think, all those trade restrictions in the beginning of the trade war in 2018, because the fear was that China, where data is accessible to companies because there is no sort of privacy and protection, or even if it is there it is very loose, the Chinese companies could actually become dominant because, as you know, artificial intelligence, the feedstock of artificial intelligence is data, and data access in China was very easy. And therefore, they could steal a march in technology, they could steal a march in artificial intelligence. And you know that artificial intelligence and technology today can be used for so many things, not only for peaceful trade and economic dominance, but it can also be used for military dominance. And I think that hegemony of the United States was being challenged by China. And it was in that sense, I think, at least a part of the reason of the trade war or imposition of tariffs by the United States was this fear of technological and dominance of China and artificial intelligence. So this is an extremely important area because, as I said, data becomes extremely important. Data is the feedstock of artificial intelligence. Storage is becoming cheaper. Algorithms are becoming much faster and much more sort of forward-looking. And therefore, it's important to, not to enable any one country to dominate this in such a way that it could become a hegemon in the space of data and artificial intelligence. Therefore, I think collaboration is extremely important between countries. I know the MLAT hasn't worked very well, but collaboration has to be there between countries so that data can be used for peaceful purposes, data can be used for development purposes, and data can be used for inclusive purposes. These are extremely important. And I think all of these aspects are being looked at in the PDP bill. And one hopes that when the PDP bill comes out in India, when it becomes law, we are able to balance our economic aspirations, we are able to balance our privacy ambitions, and we are also able to create value, because India, as you know, has enormous value, as Meenakshi was also saying, that it is Indians that are developing a lot of the algorithms, a lot of the value of data, not in India, but in other countries. If we are able to lure them back into the country, provide a good ecosystem within the country, get Make in India started, then I think the value that is being created outside can be created in India. I don't want to go on and talk about all the weaknesses that we have as an economy in being able to attract the NRIs into the country, but the government is doing things, is trying to improve the regime so that what people do outside the country, they can also do within the country. It is the development model of China. China attracted a lot of non-resident Chinese to come into the country. It is the development model of Taiwan, a smaller country, but they attracted a lot of expatriates to come back. And I think India has been trying to do that. And if we are able to do that, especially in the IT space, we'll have several more Bangalores, we'll have several more Punes and Trivandrums and Gurgaons that can come in to India and leverage what I think we have as a comparative advantage, which is our people, our demographics. Meenakshi spoke about it. And we are producing so much data in the country. 12 GB of data per day is what we are using. And this is going to become much, much larger in the future. If we can utilize all of this, then I think India is well positioned to be a digital economy, which is not only $1 trillion, as the Prime Minister has said, but it could be much more than $1 trillion. But as we know in India, that it's important to get the policy right. We've had lots of policy failures, but I think in this space, the digital space, given COVID, given post-pandemic, where digitization and digitalization are both going to become extremely important and pervasive, it's important to get the policy right, it's important to get the institutions right, so that we can leverage very quickly and not keep changing our policy or vacillating as we have often done in the past, and therefore we've not been able to leverage the complete benefits of the digital economy. So it's important to get it right, and I'm happy that this bill is going through a lot of discussion, a lot of analysis, and when it comes out, I hope it's in a form where we can leverage the benefits. I'll make only one more remark, and before I invite the panelists, which is that once this bill comes and we recognize the trade-offs and we recognize the competition issues that big companies already have because of their network effects. United States has already come hard on one of the bigger companies and wanting to break them up. This is a throwback to what happened to Microsoft in 1998. These big companies, structural remedies for big companies that have data and often don't respect the privacy, structural remedies of breaking them up is one part of the story. The other part of the story is quick and efficient enforcement. And I say that because structural remedies for in the digital space where network effects are important, it's just a matter of time when they become big again. So for all means, look at structural remedies, but also it is extremely important to have an enforcement mechanism that is swift, that is efficient, and that comes down very hard on companies. Often people say in India that I can get by the law. India is a soft state. Let that in the digital space. If there is an errant company, then come down on it hard. And therefore, when we create a data protection authority, and if we have a data protection authority that is all encompassing rather than sector based, we have to think about whether that data protection authority is going to be, how is it going to be staffed? How is it going to be manned? But the fundamental question there is, do we need a data protection authority, or can we let sector have a mechanism that achieve the same? I mean, these are questions. What the for whether or not, but this question that we must have seen, given of institutional in the 1991, we've created so many regulatory institutions. Pre-91, we had the RBI, and they've done a fantastic. Post-91, we've created many regulatory institutions in the country. There have been issues raised around staffing, around capacity building, around credibility of these institutions. Naturally, there is evolution of institutions. Nobody, not even the United States, created good institutions. And today you would say, post-Trump, they are not the institutions that you want to emulate, because there's so much of leadership issues there. But the question is, if we have a DPA, how is it going to be staffed? How is it going to be managed? How is it going to be funded? And if we don't have it, how are you going to then staff the existing regulator? And how is a collaborative mechanism going to be created among the existing regulatory authorities? So I think with those initial remarks and thanking Samir and of course Meenakshi ji for those wonderful remarks that I heard when I came into this discussion, I'm delighted to say that we have an extremely erudite panel. And thank you, Samir, and of course ICRIER, the team at ICRIER, for putting this together. We have Dr. Gulshan Rai, not needing any introduction. We have Ms. Seema Purushottam, founder and chairman, the Science, Indigenous Technology and Advanced Research Accelerator. We have Parminder Jeet Singh, executive director, IT for Change. Of course, also not needing any introduction, Shivangi Nadkarni, co-founder and CEO of ARCA. And we have Astha Kapoor, co-founder of APDI Institute. All of these are eminent people, and you would see their CVs online, I'm sure. But let me start, Samir, if you permit me, let me start with Dr. Gulshan Rai, who's been an old friend and such an erudite person, always a pleasure to talk to him. Of course, as you know, he was India's chief security officer. Dr. Rai, I mean, you can talk about anything, but one of the questions that I wish to put to you is, how has the nature of threats to data protection changed over time? Because this is something that you've been involved in. And how do you see the impact of regulation developed or being developed in India? Over to you, Dr. Rai.
Thank you, Dr. Kathuria. I'm so grateful to you for introducing me, and I feel honored to share the panel with you. Honorable Member of Parliament, Ms. Meenakshi Lekhi, and the Chairperson of JPC, Dr. Rajat Kathuria, Ms. Simta Purushottam, Mr. Paramjeet, Ms. Shivangi Nadkarni, Ms. Astha Kapoor, and of course, above all, our own Samir Kochar. Good morning to all of you. Friends, I have the pleasure to listen to the interview which Rohan had with the Honorable Member of Parliament, and what the great introduction made by Mr. Rajat Kathuria. Let me say that the scenario in the last more or less in decade had changed a lot, and that's why we have so much issues regarding the data. About 10 years ago, the maximum data used to be with the government and the minimum used to with the businesses and industry. That pyramid has changed. Now the state government has the more data than the federal government. So federal government has the least data, and the maximum data is with the industry and the businesses. That scenario has changed there. And that is one of the main reason that Dr. Kathuria has mentioned, the geopolitics of the tech and data. That's one of the main reasons which has happened there. Now, when you look at the innovations which are happening, and particularly is what has been implemented, and in India we're going to have it very soon, the next generation communication, the 5G, a lot of bandwidth reaching at individual phones, a lot of data flowing on those big pipes there. And this data, all kind of a data is there. The devices will be more than 60 billion by 2025. You see, it's almost the 9 times of the population of the planet there. More data for the surveillance, more issues for the governments, federal government, for the industry to look at it and create the intelligence there. It can be used for positive, it can be used for negative. Dr. Kathuria mentioned about the 12 gigabyte of a data generating there. My estimate is that the data by the next year will be somewhere or some 22 gigabyte of a data will be created before the 5G kind of a implementation in India. Now, with this kind of a data going away, and we really don't know who is doing with what, and we have seen how the furrover happened with the WhatsApp changing the policy. There need to be a regulation, and therefore this PDP bill. I am the witness to that. In 2013, we went to negotiate with the European Union. I led the delegation, and that time our IT industry never used to get the data from the Europe. ITO business, which is more than 36% of the world business in India, we don't get the business from the European because the data was not transferred. The Article 29 of the European Union came in the way. They were not ready to negotiate with us. Variety of reasons that the data goes out to you. How will you handle the data? How does my people will suit you, your industry there? Ultimately, it's more than 7 years now, we didn't get it there. And we felt that time there's a need for a data protection. And today, it's a good thing that we are going to have very soon, and hopefully, if I'm not able to say anything, if I don't offend Ms. Lekhi, we are going to have the bill into the act by March. This is my feeling there. I have no information, but this is my gut feeling that we are going to have it there. And the way the media is projecting the news is there, and that I get only from that we are going to have the act in March 2021. it's a great time, the great kind of a things. It is, I feel it is going to open the gate for many of those issues, and the businesses will be able to interact or intersect or do anything with anywhere in the world. I have been a part of the B.N. Krishna committee who drafted the basic first draft. Of course, the draft which went to the JPC, which the government introduced in the parliament, was something slightly different. This bill is a very, very complex bill, and comprehensive also, comprehensive and complex bill there. Lot of sections are there. Everything has been, is our intention, as we Indians, we do in the Bollywood film. Everything you get in the bill, we have also tried to put everything in the bill, and which Dr. Katuria was slightly cautioning us in its presentation there. There are so many good things about the bill, and I cannot say anything more about the which are not so favorable, because I don't know. The media says that there are about 89 amendments suggested by the JPC, and I feel many of those things would have been leveled out or corrected by the JPC because of the luminaries, lawyers, and the technology sitting in the committee there. But I feel that there are something which may create a concerns for the Indian industry, not only today, but in the longer run also there. One of the subjects which becomes very, very important is, and a lot of noise creates there. Yes, I heard Dr. Kuturi also talking about the geopolitics when the American, he talked about a large company there, and we all know which company is there. It's all because the data is being created there. But I think, in my view, what of the portions have been added by the ministry after the B.N. Krishna committee, that should have been added little more intelligently. And I'm sure the Parliament committee under the chairperson, of the Ms. Meenakshi Lekhi would have corrected it. And one of the issue I mentioned now is the data localization. It's going to create a hot debate. It is going to be hotly debated. I several times wonder, and we opposed in the B.N. Krishna committee the way it has come up in the bill. Yeah. Anything information which is on the internet, and today we are in a connected world there. I can say so many things there, what I have seen in the last couple of years, and very, very interesting kind of a thing. We are going to be connected, entire planet is going to be connected. Anything which is hosted, lying on the connected world, on an internet, how can that be localized? How can it be localized there? I type .com, I get authenticated by somewhere outside India, US. Can the bill stop it? It cannot stop it. And connected cars there. What kind of things are going to come in the connected car, which we are going to come by 2034 or so? Somewhere else is maintaining your car. I'm going from Delhi to Dehradun, somewhere in between, let me say Muzaffarnagar, and it gets maintained somewhere in California or somewhere outside here. It's going to be a challenging job when we talk about data localization. And I feel the clauses which has been mentioned in the bill, that I'm sure the committee would have certainly looked at it very seriously. And I am aware of that the hard work, intelligent work, and the enlightening work which the committee has done that and is doing also that. I think that's the issue which we need to handle very, very carefully here. Because I have dealt that negotiation, that we are going to negotiate, even after the PDP bill, we are going to negotiate with different countries. Today, we have 3 different frameworks in the world called the APEC framework, which is the CBC, CBPR, which is led by Japanese, Korean, and all kind of a thing. Then you have a GDPR, and then the Indian framework. Let us not forget that we are among all the 3 framework among the G20 countries, we are the later now. It's become a fait accompli, and we need to see that our framework is more consistent, compatible, and interoperable, not only with outside world, but within the world there. There are issues. With respect to the monitoring. There are issues with respect to journalism in the bill. Those issues need to be handled. And I wish JPC should define what is the critical data more or less in, because I must say that it takes a lot of time to plan for the infrastructure, for the capacities to be expended. We should, as far as possible, bring certain certainty in the various clauses in the bill that will help us. And this is what I get the feeling, I'm correct, from Dr. Ajit Kuturia, which I entirely agree that as far as possible, we need to be a little more consistent, we need to be a little more transparent, so that there is no ambiguity in terms of interpretation and the businesses are able to proceed smoothly. I feel that is going to be a very important kind of a bill, landmark kind of a thing in the Indian scenario, in the Indian entire history. It's going to be a great kind of a thing which will open a lot of factors. But the real meat will come when we frame the rules. Out of so many sections, 80% sections has a rule-making power there. And we certainly have a lot of, gaps in terms of understanding those aspects. One of the main other factor which is going to be hotly contested and is the consent manager. Second factor is going to be the Section 91, if it remains by the, if it is kept by the JPC, the non-personal data bill. These are all very complex legalistic issues there. And I think we should be very, very careful when we look at it. I would request the Honorable Chairperson that let this bill be not, there should be clauses which are not controversial, which doesn't generate a hot debate. Let us implement some basic structure, and we must evolve a mechanism to amend it as we learn more. And we are learning more. Look at, I think Paramjit will be talking about the NPD report. The NPD report are projected altogether different than what PDP bill has. They have gone more on technology and different kind of issues there. So let us make this bill as simple as possible so that it should be implementable. The ministries are able to provide the rules as quickly as possible and as clearly as possible. And by the time we gain experience, we must go for amendment, and those amendments should be quickly there. Let us see that. That's with these things. I thank once again SKOCH and the ICRIA for inviting me. It's a very, very important thing, and I think their task will be more important once it becomes an act there. Then the real fight will start in terms of rule-making power there. And it is going to be the great kind of I think that will greatly influence what Dr. Katuria said. We let us have a good law, good framework, and it should not be like what we have done in the past. Thank you very much, Dr. Katuria, for giving me opportunity. And I will be very happy to answer any question. I'm sure I'm not antagonized Miss Lekhi by saying anything. I'm only putting a word of cautioning here. The technology is changing very fast, and we need to be very, very cautious.
Thank you, Dr. Gulshan Rai. Always very candid remarks and very insightful and very intelligent. That was a stimulating talk, and I think there will be questions later on. I wanted to pick up on a couple of things you said and them over. One of the things that you said was that in the future, given that we are generating so much more data today because of technology and because of storage, etc., because we are generating so much data, and the balance of data lies more with the private sector than with the public sector, than with the government. I thought that was an extremely important point. And the other point was about implementation of data localization rules as they come up and how to get consistency with the rest of the world. I want to take this to
Dr. Katuria, let me, Dr. Katuria,
yes.
If you permit me one thing, I said one more thing which let me define very clearly, only 1 minute. The trend today,
yes,
whether we talk about India or talk about anywhere else, the processing of the data, distribution of data, access of the data is going to be completely dispersed and distributed. That also I said it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It will be. No single entity will be sort of having a stranglehold on that. So it will be distributed both within the country and outside the country. But I wanted to pose a specific question to Ms. Purushottam, in addition to whatever else she wishes to say, which is that in the bill, exemptions are being provided to the government on privacy of personal data. And as Dr. Gulshan said, although there is going to be a lot more data with the private sector, government will also own and collect this data. And there are certain actions that will be given to data. So how do you see that evolving? And I want to just contextualize this in the past by saying that, when we were growing up, and I'm talking about India of post-independence in the 50s and 60s, just my view, and no offense meant to either Meenakshi or to anybody, and trust was on very good footing. I didn't care about data, as Meenakshi was saying a little while ago. We're so fond of giving up our data, but that doesn't mean the other person can abuse that data. Now, is there a worry that if government has access to data and there are exemptions given to the government, there would be some threats or some possibilities of vulnerability of citizens on the use of that data? Could you address that issue and any other issue that you wish to? Thanks, Smita. Thank you so much.
Should I answer that? Thank you, first of all. Thank you,
Yes.
thank you, Sri Samir Kochar, for inviting me to be part of a very important discussion which affects all citizens, businesses, and in fact, our geopolitical profile. And I will certainly address your question, Dr. Katuria, because my talk is in a way centered around that issue and the importance of upholding very strong democratic institutions. In this context, I wish to thank Mrs. Lekhi because she has made a very strong case for upholding democracy, which is in fact in our blood. It dates back thousands of years, and we have a commitment, and that's why democracy has prospered in our country. I especially like also answers to Sri Rohan Kothur, her extraordinary commitment to indigenization, because my little trust, Sitara, is focused on indigenization. It is also critical to preserving of India's freedoms, and it is related to this topic, so I will come back to it a little later. But first, I wish to also take a geopolitical perspective on this issue, like the distinguished speakers have done before, and that set a context for a strong personal data protection bill. All democratic countries have strong privacy laws, and typically democracies have strong institutions, including strong data privacy laws. And the other side of data privacy is really protection of human dignity and liberty. In such a system, rights cannot be usurped arbitrarily. There are limitations on the powers of a surveillance state, and businesses are um, enjoined to handle data responsibly. And I do understand the concerns of SMEs in this regard, and I'm sure that in the amendment, some provision must have been made for addressing concerns. So on the one hand, we have the democracies and the EU, which has the general data regulation. The US also has very strong privacy laws strewn across its ecosystem. And on the other, we have China, which has developed the most technologically advanced surveillance state that this world has ever seen. And we have also seen that democracy is quite a in the attack on the Capitol, and what has allowed the Americans to fight this off is strong institutions, strong laws, and their implementation. At the same time, eminent speakers before me have referred to the struggle between China and technological and political spheres. I don't think anyone in India doubts where we are. we are firmly in the democratic camp. We are proud of our traditions. We are proud of our democracy. And therefore, the bill in question must adhere to the strongest and most, sorry, something else has come up on my screen. Let me just, yeah. It must adhere to the strongest international best practices and standards, and we must set, as Mrs. Lekhi has said, we must set an example to the world. Now, I'm quite confident that this bill is safe in her hands. The ideals she has professed, the commitment to indigenization, and her tremendous love for the country has shown through. So I feel safe that she will pilot this to the right conclusion. Now, the Supreme Court judgment, of course, 2017 has set a very high bar, and we hope that uh, that will be embodied in the text of the bill. The draft has many positive elements, but also some omissions, which have been referred to by previous speakers. For example, there is, at least I don't know whether this has been incorporated. I'm going by media reports and the text of the draft. There doesn't seem to be any reference to cybersecurity. Now, cyber attacks constitute not just a threat to data sovereignty and privacy, but also to national security. And here I would just like to state that Sitara has in fact tackled this issue, My Little Trust, and we have taken up the issue of what Ms. Lekhi mentioned, the need for indigenous production and indigenous R&D. In fact, we're going to take up R&D as the next area where we're going to take it up with the government, and we would request if Mrs. Lekhi has the time to help us on this, because she's so clearly committed and she has such a great idea and overview, and she would be minister for all these subjects. So we were afraid really that with Chinese information warfare and its preponderance in 5G and artificial intelligence, their ownership of our telecom networks is going to be extremely deleterious to our national security. We took up with PMO, we took it up with all the higher ups, and we have had tremendous success in effecting procurement reforms in telecom. You would have seen the overturning of the BSNL 4G tender recently, and the enjoyment that it should be indigenized as soon as possible. And then, of course, we also requested government to look at a Telecom Security Act, and a Telecom Security Directive has indeed come out. Legislation is still required, and again, we would appeal to the progressive members in government to support all these issues. Now, coming to data privacy and data flows, there are some other threats that are looming in our ecosystem. One is by the Big Four. The Big Four have encroached tremendously, and I hope the Competition Commission of India is consulted by the Joint Parliamentary Committee so that their reach is somewhat at least constrained. And I must mention here, at the risk of being extremely unpopular, that there is a government department which has been giving contracts to the Big Four very freely to take control of not just citizens' data, but sensitive government data. They have been offered offices in the premises of this particular organization, and Oracle Cloud has been given a huge contract to run a parallel e-government service, and so on and so forth. There are many such examples, and this, I think, should be in the purview of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, because this kind of encroachment goes right to the heart of data privacy. If they have control and access to such sensitive data, then no amount of legislation is going to stop its leakage and national security threat on top of it. So the other is, of course, the technological threat that people have mentioned. And here, I think the legislation must keep in touch with the technological advances. For example, China has now come through with facial reading technology, and it can actually read your expressions. It reminds us of pages in 1984 in John Lewis' book, in which the actions could be monitored and compliance with directives also. So now they have mind reading technology, which is the ultimate in data privacy invasion. So technology and legislation must keep pace with technology. I hope that is being taken into account. In terms of progress, it's very good with Chinese apps and creating a space for Indian apps to prosper. Apparently, an Atmanirbhar Foundation has also been created to protect our country, and those people should be consulted. Our recommendations are, of course, I mean, an endorsement of what the speakers and Mrs. Leakey have said. That is to have strong institutions, strong laws, privacy, solid protections in the law, reduce state overreach, and therefore, of course, place a limit on the exemptions that have been proposed, if in fact already not done so. I'm going by media reports on this. Give judiciary greater oversight and give the Data Protection Authority data independence, in fact, independence and autonomy, so that they are free to protect.
Thank you very much, Smita. Sorry for intervening. You know, we have a hard stop at 10:55 for Mrs.
I'm finished. I'm finished. Just, and also please references to cybersecurity and indigenization and technological advancement.
Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rajat, please continue.
So, thank you. Now the relation.
Rajat, your sound has gone.
Sorry, zero. Can you hear me?
I think there was an audio problem with Rajat. So may I request Mr. Parminderjeet Singh to give his comments in the meanwhile?
Thank you, Sameer, and thank you, Rajat, for inviting me to speak here. As for the implications of our privacy bill, I think what it would do when it becomes an act is, of course, clear out a lot of largely unknown data-related bad activities which are taking place in India, though it will, of course, depend on its good implementation. And I think the implementation part takes over. So that's what is going to happen in the area of privacy. As for businesses, there should not be too much concern because GDPR has been around. Most of Indian digital businesses either have some kind of international connection or have a consciousness which is international. They've already understood the kind of compliance requirements they will have. So that would just, I mean, be done in due time. And I think the larger implication of this act, I'm not going into the specifics at this point, which the earlier speakers, Dr. Gulshan Rai especially spoke at length, but also Ms. Purushottam. The larger implication is that this is the first strong digital law for India. And I think it sets us up for affirmative action by the state in an area where we really need a lot of action, because initial period of experimentation with digital world is over. Now we are in mainstream digital world where the private sector has a huge role. Of course, the global corporations have a role, but the state has a huge role as well. And this is the first affirmative action. And I think it will spawn off other kinds of affirmative actions. This said, we should be very conscious that everything we do with the digital is more or less forever, because we are talking of techno structures and technology designs and architectures, which once they get set, they're very difficult to change. Everybody of you would have heard of the saying that code is law and architecture is policy. And already, as Dr. Gulshan Rai was saying, that there is the Japanese-Korean framework and there is GDPR, and we being late, we have to sync with them. So whatever we do, we should be proactive, but extremely cautious that whatever we do is forever. And that's where I would now bring in the primary question, which Dr. Kathuria has posted for this panel, is whether there's a trade-off between privacy and digital economic development. And I think we should not look at it like that. And when we are into a fast-moving times like present times, we can step out and maybe take example from a world we know better. The older world, where we know that state has its security obligations and duties, and it has industrial development or general development duties. And they are not at odds of each other at all. we never say that, are we trying to do too much of security which would imperil development? No. Government has the role of security. It has to secure my physical movement on the roads. When I go out, I may not be violated. In the same way, government has to prevent violations of my privacy and violations in the digital space. And that has nothing to really do with the industrial development role of the state which comes. And we should not be looking at shortcuts in this period, as I was saying, that everything we do is forever. We are setting a design of a digital society which would be the dominant society for, say, at least 4 or 5 decades, if not more. So that is very important. The second question posed in the concept note is a very direct one, whether privacy becomes a competitive advantage. And I think we should not look at it even in that manner. It does not. Europe did the mistake where GDPR had a hidden, what I call as digital industrial objective. There was an objective that somehow by better privacy, European companies would be able to compete with the US companies. This has not happened. Actually, there are studies which show that in the EU, because of GDPR, Google and Facebooks of this world have entrenched themselves more at the expense of the smaller companies, which is not to say that we should not have privacy. As I've already said, the security role is paramount and we should have strong privacy. And I congratulate all those associated with the bill who have been taking it forward. I'm very sure we'll get a very good privacy act very soon, as Dr. Rai was saying, by March perhaps. What I'm saying is that if we have digital industrial policy objectives, we should be upfront with them. We shouldn't hide them behind a privacy law or such, which EU did. They realized their mistake, and now recently they have come up with a slew of projects and laws which are more clearly going towards the objective of digital industrialization. So we shouldn't be very bothered about whether privacy will badly affect our businesses. Digitalization is a very powerful force. Whatever security and whatever privacy we ensure, still everything will get digitalized. And when everything gets digitalized, there would be a huge number of businesses, almost as much and as many businesses as it would be with less privacy. The question is, who has these businesses, whether they are businesses or they are extractive industries from outside who are taking away all the profits. It's an issue of distribution rather than whether there would be industrial businesses or not. And that's where a digital industrial strategy comes to fore. And I would appeal to the policymakers that they should actually get very focused upfront for a digital industrial policy. They should name it a digital industrial policy. Somehow, industrial policies as a term has got out of fashion, following an ideology which those people have sold us, and we seem to have accepted whose companies we are trying to compete against. So once we get into this digital industrial policy mode,
I would like to move on to the speakers because we have barely 2 minutes.
Okay, what did you say, Samir? Sorry.
I think unfortunately we're timing out. Much that we would like to listen to you.
Yeah. So I'll just close it. So, so I think the effort towards a digital industrial policy should focus more on how we can build data infrastructures, for instance, and the non-personal data committee, of which I am also a member, is working on developing those kind of data infrastructures which can support the local industry. We don't want to go the China way, which did things without in an ad hoc manner. We want to do it in a rule of law manner. Therefore, let's have a digital industrial strategy in a rule of law manner and be explicit about it. And strong privacy is going to be good for industrialization, digital industrialization, rather than be bad. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Parman. I think that's important to ensure that data infrastructures are such that privacy doesn't allow only some companies or only big companies to survive. And that brings me to a question that I want to ask Shivangi also, is there anything, I mean, as Parminder is saying, you ensure that you create structures that don't enable monopolization. To turn around the question, will the PDP bill have higher compliance costs for smaller companies, and therefore will SMEs be affected or MSMEs be more affected than others. Could you address this and any other points? But very quickly, Shivangi, I hope you can condense your remarks. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rajat. And first of all, thank you for inviting me, all of you. I think, yeah, I'll speak from the point of view of corporates because that's what I have, a good insight into. I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that this is something which is going to add to costs. And I think the costs are not just for small businesses, everywhere. The entire corporate world is going to find this to be a lot of cost. I'm going to actually take a step back and say that most people, while we have these discussions, while there is so much of user sort of feedback, incidents like the recent WhatsApp incident, etc., has created a lot of need within as individuals. But the same individuals, when they wear their enterprise or their company hats, suddenly seem to have like a disconnect is what I sense. They don't seem, I don't think people are companies are fully yet aware of the implications of this bill that is going to come on them. First of all, very few people really understand. It is still confused as a technology problem, as a security problem. I don't think too many people understand the implications of it as being a core business problem impacting them, first of all. Second, I think the amount of, I would say lack of awareness and comprehension is so large. We have a large gap to fill over there. And then therefore it comes to costs. So yes, there are costs with implementing, but it depends also on how the company treats it. Is it, it's still treated like a compliance problem, or is it something which is a core business problem? People look at it from that perspective. And I think the cost of implementation is definitely huge. And it's going to be further exacerbated by the problem of complete lack of available skills in the market. We talk about security and how we have lack of security skills. Privacy is just not there. And to imagine now, if you're stepping into a scenario where you have to implement a law which for which there are no skill sets available in the market, so what are companies going to do? It is going to further lead to rise in cost. So in fact, I would like to use this forum to say, if the eminent people over here would look at maybe incentivizing companies in some way, maybe in terms of tax breaks, otherwise, to actually go out and take this seriously, implement it seriously, so that there is some sort of, the entire ecosystem sort of comes up. I don't know if that sort of answers your questions, and if there's time for covering a few more points, I would.
Thank you, Shivangi, for being brief, and yes, it does. And the last panelist, but not the least, let me bring in Asta Kapoor, and a direct question to you, Asta, the founder of the Institute, and direct question to you is, according to recent reports, the PDP may also sort of expand its ambit to include sensitive, non-personal data in it.
Sorry, Rajat, I couldn't really hear you very well, but from what I gathered is that the PDP will also be looking at healthcare and NPD.
Non-personal data.
Yeah.
Non-personal data. What are your views on that?
So I think that the new draft has actually of the NPD report, well, thank you so much for having me, but I'll jump right into it, has made the distinction between the fact that the NPD report is only going to be dealing with certain types of data clearer, and also is dealing with the sharing of B2G data, which is also a sense of clarity. But I want to talk about an idea that is mentioned both in the PDP and also now in the new National Digital Health Policy, is that of the consent manager, and how these consent managers, which also I suppose and DEPA mentions them too, which is the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, are these advisors to data principles that will help people navigate the data economy, and possibly also come up as a new business that will that will help individuals manage consent, that will help people navigate questions of how their data is being shared more effectively. But to me, I think that this is something that needs to be expanded much, much further, because as we think about all the different data, whether it's in health, whether it's in financial services, I think that individuals in this in this isolated, atomized manner may not be able to negotiate as effectively with all the demands that are being made of their data and of their everyday lives. Like we saw this in the context of, say, the migration crisis, where businesses, the state, all of them were extracting significant amounts of data. Even now with the vaccine run, we'll see that it's actually going to be enrolling for vaccines is a pretty data extractive exercise. So how do we create systems such that individuals are able to resist it? And I think, Parminder mentions this, and the NPD committee mentions this, as the idea of the community data rights, and how we can create systems that help us negotiate on questions of consent and how our data is being managed, shared, etc., without burdening just the individual. And I think that that's something that we need to consider further. It's not entirely clear in the PDP bill, and even the NPD bill mentions these instruments which we call data stewards, but it's not really clear what the implementation will look like, what the business models will look like. Even, there's a mention that non-profits and community-based organizations will be able to play this role. But again, the question that Shivangi also mentioned is that there's a huge capacity gap, a huge, cost to building new channels for navigating the data economy, which remain unanswered at the moment. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Asta. Candid remarks and very insightful. I'm not going to try and summarize the discussion. We're running out of time, but it's been a very rich discussion. Thank you all the panelists, and thank you, Scotch, for partnering with ICRIER for this fascinating discussion on data privacy and its implications for the PDP Bill 2019. Back to you, Samir, for your remarks.
Thank you so much, Rajat. I do realize that we have not done justice to this panel at all in terms of time. And if all of you agree, I think there's a lot more that needs to be discussed. And, some of these concerns have to be maybe articulated a little better or in more detail. So if everyone would agree, then Rajat, if you could set up a time on Monday or Tuesday for about 2 hours, we would like to do this whole thing again. And I assure you that you'll get the right people will get your messages. I'll make sure that Meenakshi ji takes note of that 2 hours. Although she may not sit through it for 2 hours, but I will make sure that she gets all the inputs. That, I am really, really worried about is the impact of all of this on MSMEs. Parminder is very bullish about, industry being in consonance with the GDPR and all of that. Well, I don't understand half of it. So if I do not understand half of it, I don't know about the others. And if I look at, vendors that work with us, the guy who does the stage for us, he's an MSME, he's got a data. The guy who does music for us, the guy who does the editing for us, how will all of those guys, you can't write all laws for Tatas and Birlas and Reliance to comply with, because they have the capacity. What about the Kirana wala who's got all our data on the WhatsApp and what we consume? So with that, before we end this panel, on behalf of all of us and on behalf of SKOCH Development Foundation, I invite Dr. Gulshan Rai to congratulate Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi for the commendable work in a very unenviable job. Actually, it's a very difficult job to do. And whatever you'd like to say, then I'll call on Mrs. Lekhi to say a final words. Dr. Gulshan Rai.
You, Dr. Rai. Dr. Rai, you're muted, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Samir, for giving me the honor for congratulating Miss Meenakshi Lekhi. Miss Lekhi, I congratulate you from the core of my heart, very sincerely. The award which Samir Kochhar and the SKOCH Foundation has given to you, you deserve it. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward that the bill should be known as Miss Lekhi's bill and people should feel proud of it there. And I'm very sure it will be done. And we will be certainly will be very happy to honor once again when you submit the report to the Parliament, and we look forward for that. Thank you. But I have a complaint also. I have requested you, I requested every member, I wanted to make a presentation, detailed presentation on the relating technology and the geopolitics. Somehow, I think the committee was short of time and didn't get it. That's a kind of a thing with me. But I'm looking for to call a bill, Ms. Lekhi's bill.
Thank you very much. With that, Mrs. Lekhi, if you'd like to respond, and then we'll close this session.
You're on mute, madam.
So I must confess publicly that I have known Dr. Gulshan Rai for a fairly substantial period of time. I acknowledge all the good work that he has done before the bill was sent out to me. And his notes and his presentations, I have gone through every word of it. Let me assure a whole lot of people at times due to constraint of time after working, I think this JPC has consumed the maximum number of hours as compared to previous JPCs. It's at times not possible, but I acknowledge all your contributions from the bottom of my heart. And everyone else is also who's, like who were in consultation earlier, who were part of Sri Krishna committee, who were in the administrative positions before that with government, who brought out all the previous drafts and engaged with the public at large. So I acknowledge everyone. And as I said in the beginning, with all humility at my disposal, I want to thank everyone for their contributions. But I also believe that none of us can be so attached to laws and legalese. End of the day, it's a law, and it will go through changes as and when more and more points are brought forward and more concerns which need to be addressed. And that's precisely what I have tried to do. I hope all of you will appreciate when it comes out the kind of detailing and depth, insight into various things that's gone into.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.